Welcome back to the Just Baseball Show. It is Wednesday, February 22nd, and we continue our top 10s. But now we're taking a slight detour. Instead of individual players, we're judging double play combinations. We got Aram, and we have the writer of this article. These are his rankings, so don't get mad at Aram and I specifically, but at the same time, we do back these rankings, and you can find them on justbaseball.com, the top 5 double play combinations. We're going to go through honorable mentions. We're going to debate. It's going to be a fun show. Ryan, you are the host. Well, you also are the managing editor at justbaseball.com, but you are the host of the new podcast on the Just Baseball Network, and that is Who's Better Baseball. I was just on to debate with you NL West versus NL East. I love the show. It's a debate show. We love to debate, so we decided to bring that on here. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing good. I think Peter told me he waxed me in that conversation. You guys can go back and watch it. I don't know about that. I think that you're just a little bit more aggressive, but I'm more level-headed. People can go back and look at it. I think Peter's always going to think he wins any debate, but I think it was a good conversation. We'll find out by the end of the year who actually won it when the NL East wins more games than the West. It all comes down to Arms Marlins. Can they win 75 games? That was the big thing. Arm,
that's not a hill you want to die on, brother.
You died on last year too.
Before we get into the rankings, I have to ask you guys, because Jack and I were arguing yesterday on the show about In-N-Out, about the best burgers that you can find. Now, I'm slightly biased. Of course, I'm from California, grew up on In-N-Out, but I've lived in New York. I've been to the middle of the country. I haven't really enjoyed a lot of the burgers down south, but I feel like I have a decent understanding of burgers in America. And he ranked, listen to this, he ranked Culver's number 1. Now, I've never had Culver's.
That's a guy that's been living in Indiana. I'll tell you that right now.
I mean, what a loser Jack is, right, Aram?
Okay. I think In-N-Out is more of like a regional passion thing, kind of like for me being from South Florida or Florida in general, like people are with Publix, right? Think as a Florida guy, like it's at the end of the day, it's a grocery store. And I do think that it's nuts. I don't even know what Culver's is. There's no way it's a better burger than In-N-Out. There's no way.
There's just no way. So
that's
Ryan,
just Jack trying to be different.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it's him trying to be artsy and just straight up wrong. I mean, probably, I think one of his worst takes that's ever been spoken into a mic. So before we get into our top 5, I need to hear your top burger chain. Ryan, we'll start with you, then Aram, then we'll finally get to the baseball part of the Just Baseball Show.
That's tough, man. It's tough. As someone who worked at McDonald's for a long time, I just try to stay away from all fast food burgers. I like to get a burger from a restaurant, but I will say I did go to school in Pensacola for a little bit. Whataburger was pretty fire out there. So Whataburger, underrated.
I'm fine with that being your favorite. I'd say it's wrong, but I'm fine with it. I can understand it. It's sort of like when we talk about these double play combinations, finishing 3rd, 4th, Seager versus Correa.
I've only had In-N-Out once, man. I've had it once and I was like 7. So I can't say In-N-Out when I haven't really had it,
You're uncultured. It's okay. At least you admit it. Aram?
Yeah.
Is BurgerFi like a national chain? Is that considered a big enough chain?
Never even heard of that.
Come on, down here. Yeah.
Is that only Florida?
That's your number 1 over Five Guys, over In-N-Out?
I would say Five Guys. I'd go Five Guys. I'm a big fan. The fries, I'm going to bake the fries into it. Five Guys is probably my answer. I like the peanut oil situation. I like the bacon. I'm going to go Five Guys with my answer. But if you're in Florida, try BurgerFi. It's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. 2 answers that I'm not upset about. Culver's, I was extremely upset.
What the hell is Culver's?
And it almost ruined the top 10 shortstop episode for me. Thankfully,
it doesn't surprise me.
Thankfully we got to talk about infields, which we will do in this episode. And let's finally get into it. So Ryan again wrote the top 5 double play combinations on justbaseball.com. You can find that article. Ryan, these are your rankings. Aram and I looked through the list. I agree on most of it. Some we're going to debate a little bit, but it's pretty straightforward. How did you rank these guys?
It's
for things, sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, originally I think we were discussing top 10, top 5. What do we do? ultimately, I went with the top 5 because I felt like the back half of that list, it was more based on one player, right? There was, you go to the Braves, like Ozzie Albies is established. Is Vaughn Grisham going to be that guy? He might be, but when we're ranking at the beginning of the season, I don't know if we put it there. Bo Bichette is awesome. Santiago Espinal, Whit Merrifield, who's the second baseman, and how do we kind of rank them? So that was why I went with the top 5. It was interesting trying to look at really, I think when we get into the nitty gritty of the list, the top 3 was pretty clear to me. And then the 4, 5, and the honorable mentions, I almost would not be mad if anyone wants to have an argument with any of that kind of group of 5, because I feel like there's the honorable mentions was more based on maybe not being as established as the 2 that I put behind our top 3 that we'll get into here. But ultimately, I mean, there's some really good double play combinations in baseball. I think one of the things that I found most interesting about this list is not a lot of double play combinations have been together for a while.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of go through it, but like most of them, they've been formed over the last 1 to 2 years. And the number 1 team, shockingly, has been the longest formed double play combination, and it's only 3 years running.
And how do you balance offense and defense? Because looking through, it seems like some you just believe in the bat a little bit more. Some you rely on their defensive acumen. Like, is it 50-50? How do you rate defense and offense for a double play combination?
I think, you want to make sure that there's at least 1 plus defender between the 2. But it was really just, we could kind of go, each team by team, and you'll kind of see where my head was at. But a lot of it just came down to, what they just did. And I leaned a little bit more towards this past season than projecting out, because I think if we project out, there's a couple double play combinations that I look at and I say the potential is there for them to be maybe the best in baseball over some of the ones that are ranked ahead. I went a little bit more towards who just did it this season, for particularly the top 2 that I ranked here.
Without giving it away, is there anything when you look at the list, anything egregious? I don't want you to say it right now, but is there anything that jumps out at you where you can't wait to debate that? Or do you think it's a pretty fine list with some holes that we want to uncover?
Honestly, I don't know if I would really disagree with any of it. The interesting part that I wanted to build off of Fink's point was that the honorable mentions could each be like number 3 at some point if they have years that we think that they can have, right? Like, and just to highlight one of them, Wander Franco and Brandon Lau. Could you, like, those guys, if they play to their potential next year, that's arguably that could arguably be the number 2. And it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility if they both had their 100th percentile outcome that it's the best middle infield duo in baseball somehow. It'd be really hard to do. But like, just the fact that like there's even a 1% chance of that is a testament to just how talented even some of these middle infield duos are that are not in the top 5. I think where you could get a little bit nitpicky, the one area, Peter, I would say, is 5 versus the honorable mentions. And that's where it becomes a challenge of like, how much do you weight the superstar and then the other guy versus like really solid player, or superstar and like emerging player? It's a tough balance. So that's going to be fun to kind of break down.
And Ryan, getting straight into the first honorable mention, like Aram mentioned, Brandon Lau and Wander Franco, talent-wise, they're top 5, but availability is important. Brandon Lau's been banged up. Wander Franco has played 153 games in his career over 2 seasons. I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, tell me if I'm wrong now, if they play 130 games each, this is a top 5 double play combination. It's just about doing that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times with these top 10s, I like to put this type of a group or that type of a player in an honorable mention, because it's almost like you're kind of taking a pass on ranking them. Like if we put Wander Franco as an honorable mention in our top 10 shortstop, he did crack the list. To me, it wasn't about, not acknowledging him as a top 10 shortstop. It's he didn't play all of last season. We know that once. It's more just, hey, we're mentioning the fact that this guy has this question, but we know that if he's healthy, that's where he's going to be on the list. So yeah, Wander and Lau, like that could be the best double play combination in baseball, as Aram said. But they're coming off a year where they were both injured and Lau wasn't that good when he was on the field. We saw what Lau did in 2020 and 2021, where he might be, the best power hitting second baseman in all of baseball. And we know Wander is supposed to be this stud that could be the best shortstop in baseball. I think both of them were in like the 8 to 10 range of our top 10s on second base and shortstop. So I think that it was fair to mention them, but I didn't believe that I could put them above the 5 teams that we ended up going with.
And here was, I guess, my first issue, because I believe this should be a top 5 double play combination, and that's Nico Hoerner and Dansby Swanson. Just straight defense alone, I think they're number 2 to, the Mets, which we will talk about in this top 5. But even offensively, like Nico Hoerner is a really good bat. We've talked to pitchers on this podcast who said Nico Hoerner is one of the toughest ABs that they've had. Kind of a name that we were surprised about. And when we spoke to Justin Steele, who was on his team, he called him the most underrated player in all of Major League Baseball. And that's not even mentioning the guy coming off a 6.5 WAR season. Aram, before we go to Ryan to get his kind of opinion on this, because of course it's his list, I want to go to you. Should this have cracked your top 5, or do you agree with Ryan where they're probably on the outside looking in?
This is the one spot where it's tough, because it's kind of that exact question that I posed, right? I know Dansby had like a superstar-ish season in the department of FWAR, but I mean, I don't think anyone's looking at Dansby Swanson as a superstar, and that's not a slight. He's a really good player. Nico Hoerner, really good player. Those are 2 really good players. You get to number 5, you have a superstar and an emerging young player. That's where it's a really tough juggle. On one side, and this kind of goes into like one of your first questions to Ryan, Peter, which was, how do you weight this? Because Swanson and Hoerner could both be 100 WRC plus guys next year, and I think they'd combine for like 7 or 8 WAR, right? So
maybe more.
So that gives them such a high floor. And then I think Horner's bat's going to keep getting better. I don't know how Swanson's going to hit. I won't pretend to have an idea there, because he is kind of really tough to fully project offensively, and has improved in some areas, regressed in some. It's weird. I think that if you believe to spoil it, if you believe in Bryson Stott, then you can really make that case. And I wonder if that's why Fink has the Phillies duo ahead to spoil number 5. Like, is it the belief in Bryson Stott, or is it maybe that you don't know how Swanson's going to bounce back, or not bounce back, but I mean, build off of what was a career year?
Yeah, I think for me, that was the biggest thing. It was trying to look at our honorable mentions and then weighing the fact that Trey Turner is the second best shortstop of baseball. Like, to me, it was Trey Turner is that good. He is the best player of the bunch. And as much as Swanson had an unbelievable season, it's wondering, is he going to do it again? Whereas Trey Turner, I know he's going to do it. And the more I looked at Stott, if we throw out the first 2 months of his season where he was trying to get his feet wet, he wasn't that much different than Nico Hoerner. His WRC plus was 102 compared to 106 for Hoerner. The defense, he was playing shortstop, not second. Now, granted, so was Hoerner, and he was better at shortstop, but I don't know if the gap between Hoerner and Stott is that great, where I feel like the gap between Trey Turner and Swanson is bigger. So that's why I went that way.
Actually, that's a really good argument. The way you put it that way, I can totally see that, because it's like, if you were to rank these guys, you're Trey Turner, then a big gap, then Dansby, Hoerner, Stott, or Dansby, Stott, Hoerner. Like, it's not that far off, but the gap for Turner puts them at number 5. And before we really truly dive into number 5, Correa and Polanco, again, another one where I'm like, yeah, they could probably be top 5. Like, this is why this list is so fascinating to me, because there's so many good arguments here. Because Carlos Correa is a top 5 shortstop. You could put him at 5, you could put him at 2, and I don't think you or any of us would be upset with that ranking. So, and then you have Jorge Polanco, who you'll find on our utility rankings. We didn't rank him within the top 10 second baseman, because plays some shortstop, plays some DH, has played other positions before. So we thought a good spot for him would be the utility rankings. It might be wrong. He might just play a full-time second baseman, and we apologize for that. That's where we put him initially. So that's where we're going to rank him. If you're upset, I don't know what to tell you. Go ahead.
What's interesting to know, the one thing I want to add on that is the Twins were oscillating between having Correa or not. Were they going to bring him in, which that would make Polanco either play short or not. And then depending on what happens with Royce Lewis, he could play second, he could play short. I don't think he's going to play center. Now Correa is in the fold. Like, I am interested to see how they handle Polanco there. So we definitely should have probably mentioned him in one way or another. I think he got a little bit lost in the shuffle there, but I think it makes more sense for us to rank him as a utility guy, and I think that's what we're going to do. If he ends up playing all of his games at second base, sorry about that, but he was a weird one to try to like land in a spot, especially with how interesting the Twins infield situation is. But that leads us into the final honorable mention, which it was another tough one, because I think you could make the case, as you said, Correa's elite. Polanco, similar to Lau, really good 2021, a little bit of a step back last year, a little banged up, more of just a step back. I almost don't know what's worse. Is it better to be unavailable or available and take a step back? Like, I don't know. So how did you consider that, Fink?
Honestly, the Twins, just to be completely brutally honest, have like fallen off my radar for a lot of it. When we made our top tens, Carlos Correa was supposed to be a third baseman for the Mets. When we were having our big Zoom discussing, we're like, all right, he's either the fourth best shortstop or the fifth best. I mean, we didn't know where to put them. And I feel like because of that, the Twins have kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. Ultimately, I still don't believe they're a top 5 double play combination, because again, it gets back to how much I value Trey Turner compared to everybody else. Like, as great as Correa is, Trey Turner, I feel great knowing that he's going to play 150 games for the Phillies this year. I don't know how many games Correa is going to play. Not to say that it's because of the ankle, but, throughout his career, we just don't entirely know there. And we think it's Polanco playing second, but it could be Nick Gordon. It could be a lot of guys. They have a ton of infielders. It could be Royce Lewis. So it's also that where we don't really know exactly what the double play combination is going to be in Minnesota.
And Polanco, sorry, real quick, Polanco played 104 games last year and had a 1.8 FWAR, right? Like, this guy's not a great defender at second base. They stretch him at shortstop. He's definitely not a great defender there. And with Arias out, that could be a guy that ends up DHing a little bit more than I think we thought, especially with Lewis eventually returning. So, I think when you bake in defense too, none of these guys on this list are bad at defense. Most of them are good, and a lot of them are great. I think if you go through all of the defenders here, if I'm not mistaken, I would probably say Polanco is the worst defender of all these middle infielders. Would that be fair, Peter?
Yeah.
I'm going through it. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean,
Bichette,
I think,
but
maybe Bichette. He's a shortstop.
And Bichette, the Blue Jays combination isn't on this list.
Yeah. He was a mention in the introduction, not even an honorable mention. So,
and we'll get to the the Padres double play combination, but I guess you can make the argument for Bogarts at short, but I still think Polanco is the right answer of worst defender on this list.
Yeah.
And he had that down year defensively when his calling card is power, and he had 16 home runs. It's not like he had 4, but it's not like he had 30 like he can. Yeah. So it's a balance. And that's why I do appreciate number 5 getting now into the list, Trey Turner and Bryson Stott, because you're right. Over Bryson Stott's full season last year, 83 WRC plus through 127 games, but he really, really, really struggled in those first 2 months. And if we're talking about a balance of upside and floor, we know what we're going to get from Trey Turner. We're going to get the second best shortstop in Major League Baseball. We're going to get one of the best overall players in Major League Baseball. And then if Bryson Stott is above average second baseman, there's almost no debate that this can't be a top 5. But it's just, what are we going to get from Bryson Stott switching over to a new position? It should help him, because now he has more of a home. He knows his role there with the Phillies. I think Arm especially has been a Bryson Stott guy. I'm curious, Arm, before Fink kind of gets into the overarching idea of having them at 5, I just want to hear your, projection of Bryson Stott in 2023.
Yeah, I thought what I saw in the second half was exactly what I thought we could see, which was you mentioned the floor, in the balance of floor and a little bit of upside is like, when I was pitching you guys on the Just Baseball show ahead of the season on Bryson Stott after watching him in the fall league and watching him, through the minor leagues, I was like, look, this guy's nothing's going to jump off the page, but he's pretty good at everything. We saw down the stretch above average or at least average power. We saw an average or above average approach. We saw above average speed. We just saw a guy that's just 50 grades across the board or a little bit better. And that's really darn good. And you can't account for the learning curve for players. It's going to be different for everybody. What I can tell you is almost all of them do have learning curves, unless you're a freak like Julio Rodriguez or Michael Harris, or the very short list of players that instantly, settle in. But you look at the WRC plus from first half to second half. Again, that second half was exactly the Bryson Stott that I saw in the minor leagues. 58 WRC plus in the first half. He effectively doubled it in the second half to 106 basically. So it's insane to nearly double your WRC plus in the second half, and then had some success in the postseason. This guy's just a really well-rounded player, and I think at second base we're going to see the defense tick up.
And I guess if I gave you a WRC plus of 100 and you had to bet over or under, are you going over?
I'm going over.
Okay, then they probably deserve to be top 5, right, Ryan? Because I think you're in the same boat. And then, of course, we're all in the same agreement about Trey Turner.
Yeah, I mean, he was a 2 F4 player after he hit his first home run at the end of May. And so I think about him at second base and, can he be worth 3.5 wins this year? I think that's a realistic outcome for him. And if Trey Turner is 6.5 wins, I mean, that's going to be one of the best double play combinations in baseball.
So number 4 is fascinating because when I saw number 4, that was my big issue with the list. I almost coined the term egregious, but then I really thought about it. And you have Xander Bogaerts, who is one of the best shortstops in Major League Baseball, even if he's a freaking scarecrow at shortstop, not being able to move, he's going to hit. And he's going to hit everywhere. He's going to hit 300. He's going to have plenty of doubles. And even if the power is a little bit down, I just think this is one of the best bats kind of our era. Kind of one of the more all-around bats. Like you look at run value, each pitch, he hits every single pitch. It doesn't matter if it's off speed. It doesn't matter if it's high velo, fastballs, cutters, splitter. It doesn't matter. He hits it. But then you have Ha-Seong Kim, who was really, really solid last year. He's not a guy, again, who's super flashy. He's not Fernando Tatis Jr. with the tools, but the man at shortstop can pick it with anybody. And he was a slightly above average hitter. And now moving over to second base, kind of similar to Nico Horner, he could win the Gold Glove while being an above average hitter. So I went from egregious to, no, this is actually probably pretty spot on, right, Arm?
Dude, I'm a Ha-Seong Kim believer. We used to talk about it, in the group chat in the offseason. I was like, man, I wouldn't mind the Marlins going and getting him. And I may mention
the best player.
Podcast. He's a good player. And I think he could be a guy that continues to get better. I think what people forget is, he debuted in 2021, coming over from the KBO, had an obviously bad offensive season. And then this was his second year, like getting acclimated. He didn't have a AA or AAA experience. Like that kind of was his AA, AAA experience. And he got another guy, great second half. Horner is, I think a higher floor bat in terms of just the way he puts bat to ball. He's a little bit better athlete, but I think Kim can run into some baseballs, man. I think he's got a little bit more power. And I think the glove is right there. You mentioned what he did at short. He was 5 defensive runs saved at second base in what was, I believe, 24 games there. Like this guy barely played there and was 5 DRS. He was 10 DRS at shortstop. I think he could be it could be between him and Horner for a Gold Glove at second base this year, which alone, complimenting a superstar like you mentioned with Xander is great. And then I think Xander's improvement defensively, we'll see if it holds up again this year. But Xander having a career year defensively has to really help. And I think this is going to be a sneaky, decent defensive middle infield duo. Obviously, Xander is one of the weaker defenders of this group, but it helps when you have one of the best defensive second basemen, and Xander improved there. And then I think you see Ha-Seong Kim improving offensively, and Xander already being one of the best bats of this whole group here. So I think there's that high floor of an establishedness like that we have, with still a little bit more of like, they can do some more. Ha-Seong Kim almost had a 4 F4 last season. Like, it's not bad at all.
It's not bad at all, too. And I was just, reading the list, too. And it's weird not seeing Fernando Tatis Jr. there because he's most likely going to be playing in the outfield. And I was also watching MLB Network, and people are really excited about Tatis. He talked about, I think he had shoulder surgery in the offseason. He had wrist surgery as well. And the shoulder is doing really well. The wrist is a little bit behind, but the shoulder looks great. He looks ready to go. He looks ready to prove people wrong. And when you already have the talent of Fernando Tatis Jr. and then you add a little bit of motivation, he could have an incredible year, but he's not even here. But the great thing about the Padres, Ryan, is they have Bogarts and Ha-Seong Kim too. I mean, this is a really good team.
Yeah, I mean, on my list, I said if it was Tatis at short and Bogarts at second, I'd be like, do we just put him one? Because like the talent alone, you'd be thinking about it. But the reason why Tatis is in the outfield is because Kim is that good of an infielder. And, you know, I wrote in the article, like if he's 15 home runs, 15 stolen bases and a Gold Glove second baseman, and that's your Robin to Bogarts Batman, I think they had to be, you know, fourth on this list. And I think that's what we see with a lot of these double play combinations and why the top three stand out. It's because the second basemen are that good in our top three.
Yeah.
So maybe it's my Corey Seager belief boiling over, but I would have the Rangers double play combination at 2 instead of 3. But at the same time, we're splitting hairs because the next 3 are all incredible. They're all the best in baseball. You put each name into a hat and you draft it any way you want, whatever order, I'm probably going to agree with you. But for the sake of this episode, I disagree with you. So you have Corey Seager and you have Marcus Semien. And Semien, we ranked really high on our top 10 second baseman. And Corey Seager, of course, was top 5 as well. Pena was an honorable mention, while Altuve, not to spoil it, number 2, is 1 versus honorable mention, both top 5. What was the deciding point to kind of have a debate between these two, Seager and Semien versus Altuve and Jeremy Pena at 2 and 3?
It's tough because I think that by season's end, if Seager stays healthy, this is probably going to be the best double play combination in baseball. Like it's the only double play combination where I could say they might hit 80 home runs this year. And that's not a laughable statement, which is insane. But we have to look at what they just did. And it's hard for me to look at Altuve and Pena, where Altuve was a 6.5 F4 guy and Pena was, not a rookie of the year, but he had a rookie of the year type season. He was above average offensively. He won a Gold Glove, and then he won the NLCS MVP and the World Series MVP. Like I look at it all together and I think, I mean, that is the double play combination that's coming off the best season other than our number 1, maybe. But again, when you combine the postseason, the regular season, I just felt like it was more acknowledging what they just did, knowing that if Seager and Semien play up to their potential this year and they don't both get off to a little bit of a slow start as they did, they're going to be the best one. And you look, and Semien didn't hit a home run until I think May 28th.
Yeah.
From that point on, that duo hit 51 home runs from basically June on. So that shows you what they can be, but they weren't that last year. So that's why they're 3.
Aaron, where do you sit on this?
Yeah, Jeremy Pena is a really interesting case. And it was a big topic on our top shortstop list, right? Of like, it's such a talented position. This guy won a Gold Glove and hit 22 home runs, but he also got on base at a 289 clip and doesn't walk and chases a lot. And it's a risky offensive profile. And he had that rough second half, right? And again, we're splitting hairs and a half here. But even though it was a 13-game sample size, what Jeremy Pena did in the postseason and on the biggest stage really like kind of gave me a little bit of pause and calm of what he's going to be able to do, I think, going into next year. And I think, I don't know if we're going to see a sophomore slump, even with the approach inefficiencies. Like those things would have got exposed on the biggest stage in the World Series or, in the ALCS. And instead he hit 345 and slugged 638 during that postseason run, hit 4 home runs. So, I think Pena is going to build off of that year. I don't know if he's going to have like a superstar season, but 3.4 F4 last year. Why can't he get on base at a slightly higher clip, hit 20 plus home runs again, and play the great defense again and be a 4.5 F4 guy? If he does that with what Jose Altuve is doing, we just talked about the top second baseman in baseball, and Altuve is a guy that, has had career year. Like that's a really tough one to beat. On the flip side, though, is there a better second baseman on this list?
No.
Than Marcus Semien, other than Jose Altuve, right? Like, other than Altuve, is there a better second baseman than Marcus Semien? I guess it would be Jeff McNeil.
Hey, don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
I think people probably inferred by now. But I guess what's interesting is it's like we're talking about the balance of like superstar and then guy down here. The Rangers are like this weird in between of like two almost superstar kind of guys. Like I know Seager's been a superstar, but in terms of what the level they played last year was kind of like almost superstar. It's a really interesting balance. So I lean with the way that it's ranked, but that's one that like the nuclear ability that the Rangers middle infield has, that it could be number one.
Ryan, be honest with me. Were you coerced by Jeremy Pena's tricep picture? Were you?
I was not. But honestly,
I don't believe you.
No, I was. I'm like the old man that's just like rings and what did you do for me in the playoffs and that type of thing. Where I was more swayed by what he did in October than anything else. Where it's hard for me not to believe in a guy when he rises to the occasion. And I honestly think that I almost feel like he had his sophomore slump during the season. I feel like the first half, everyone was kind of discovering who Jeremy Pena was. And then he had to go through it. And then when you're facing the best possible pitching in the playoffs, he made his adjustments and he delivered in the biggest way. How many times have we ever seen a guy go from NLCS MVP to World Series MVP? Like, I don't even remember seeing that. So to me, that was ultimately why I'm a little bit higher on Pena. I think I definitely had him in the top 10 when I originally ranked our shortstops. So I think I'm higher on him than a lot of us are at Just Baseball, but I just think that the defense gives him such a high floor that if he's hitting me 25 home runs, I feel like he's going to be one of the most consistent starting shortstops in the game.
I guess that's fine. But when Seager and Semien combine for 12 WAR, you guys will be eating your words. Yeah. But I'm okay with it. But
if Seager plays 65 games this year,
or if he gets on base at a 308 clip.
All right, fine. There's positives and negatives to everyone. Let's move on. This is about to be an echo chamber. And the reason I say it's about to be an echo chamber is because we all agree with number one, and we're just going to shower the praise of our number one double play combination. And it's not just because Fink has a Mets flag behind him. This is the best double play combination because we have the number one shortstop in baseball, according to all of us, and we have the number two second baseman. And Jeff McNeil, which why I love him so much is because, yes, he's one of the best second basemen in baseball, but he could be one of the better third basemen in baseball. He could be one of the better corner outfielders in baseball. Like, he's been a utility guy kind of his whole career, really found a home at second base. He's found a little bit of power, but the contact is always going to be there. Find a guy who has a better zone contact than Jeff McNeil. Find a guy who had a better batting average last year. You can't because he hit 326. And then you have the best shortstop in baseball in Francisco Lindor. So not only does this duo probably end up being the best defensive duo in Major League Baseball, they might be top three offensive also. And Fink, we're going to go through our, MVP picks, award picks, and I don't want to give it all away. And I don't even want to really talk about this because we have so many other episodes to do. But I am looking at Francisco Lindor as my MVP pick next year.
Woo!
I really am.
Yeah.
I think the value is there. I'm looking at these guys. Like, I think he could put together a career year, settled in, third season in New York, best defense in baseball at the position, drive in 110, hit 280, hit 30 bombs, be that guy for the New York Mets. And that's not even mentioning Jeff McNeil, who could hit 330. Shower the praise, my friend. This is your time to shine. You got the flag behind you. You better deliver.
I'll just sit back.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I will say, just building off that, I had a whole show about Lindor's MVP case on Locked On Mets on Monday, and the odds for Lindor right now plus 2,500. For Trey Turner, it's like plus 1,400. To me, I'm like, if I'm betting, on those two guys based on who they are as players, give me the odds on Lindor if they're that long. But look, I think when you look at this Mets team, they're built to win a ton of games, and these guys are maybe the biggest reason because of it. The fact that the Mets are so strong up the middle is why they won 101 last year. And it was those guys. It was McNeil, it was Lindor, it was Alonso, and really Nimmo last year that drove that team. And with Lindor, you look at his first season with the Mets, he was dreadful to start, but from June on, he was really good. He got hurt, so that kind of messed up his numbers a little bit too, where there was some time where he was struggling off the injury. This guy is so consistent. He's going to go out. He's going to hit at least 25 home runs. He'll swipe over 15 bags. And I think the elimination of the shift this year is going to make that defense stand out even more. And Jeff McNeil, if you're not watching Mets baseball, there's few guys that are more exciting to watch than Jeff McNeil. The jersey's always dirty. He's always, 2 hits a game. So yeah, of course I love my Mets middle infield, but when we were going through this list, when I was doing all the research on it, the second best combined F4 of any double play combination that's formed was actually Swanson and Horner last year at 10.4. Lindor McNeil was over 12. It was 12.7. So that's why, F4 alone, it was kind of a clear-cut answer on who the best double play combination was.
Do you totally agree, or do you definitely agree?
I mean, I think there's a slight snub of Joey Wendell and Luis Arias up the middle. Yeah, I think you got to look out for that duo. Yeah. They might combine for 8
and IKF and Glaber.
Yeah, I think Arias and Wendell might combine for 8 home runs this year, so he'll look out for them. But no, I mean everything that he said, that Fink just said is true, and we talked about it just on the second baseman episode. Like the way that McNeil has took that down year that was kind of a plague that was spread across the whole Mets team and hitting philosophy and analysis paralysis, and they kind of scrapped a lot of the people that were perpetuating some of that. I mean, he just went back to the basics, man. This guy, like you mentioned, Peter, you're going to be hard pressed to find a more pure hitter in baseball. It's just he makes hitting a baseball, like he hurts our case when we tell people, hey, hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in sports. If they just look at Jeff McNeil, they'll be like, what do you mean? It doesn't look that bad. Like, it looks pretty easy. And then Lindor, his floor is so high because he's going to always be one of the best defenders. And he's always going to run into 20 plus home runs. Like maybe he's not putting up 33, 35 like he did in Cleveland, but he's 20 plus every year for the last 5 full seasons. He's going to steal bags. He's going to have pitch calm in his ear and be annoying about just knowing where to be at all times. I don't even know if you can put that in numbers. Like he is just that kind of player. I think I would pretty much, if there's a gun to my head, I think I brought this up with Jack. I would pick this middle infield duo to pace the league in F4, and I think I'd sleep pretty well for all 162. Cross that bridge when we get there. But I don't think I'd be losing sleep at night and wondering if that trigger is going to be pulled come October 3rd or whatever.
No, and it's funny. The Mets double play combination is so good that it automatically puts them in the best infields in baseball, even though Eduardo Escobar plays third. I mean, of course, you have Pete Alonso to help, but because it's so good and because Pete Alonso is so good, they could have Aram at third, who is a poor man's Josh Rojas, which is a perfect kind of comfort.
I can pick it. That's all they need me to do.
That's all they need him to do. And that's all they're going to ask from Eduardo Escobar too. So that's the top 5. Great list. The more I think about it, I think you got it pretty spot on. I would argue for Dansby and Horner, but we're splitting hairs. Who were the double play combinations when writing? Because I know you said at the beginning, it was a top 10, but the back half is kind of challenging. You held it to 3 honorable mentions. Who might be 9 and 10? Like, who was the one you left off where you thought to yourself, I could easily make an argument for them in my honorable mentions?
I think the Blue Jays and the Guardians were maybe like 9, 10, with Jimenez and Rosario, with Bichette and Espinal. And then the Braves were the other one. So, I mean, if we made a top 10, there would have been maybe one honorable mention. I had to try to figure that out. But, it was tough. Again, it ultimately came down to the top 3 was pretty clear to me. I had some trouble like Rangers, Astros. That was one of the things. And then, rounding out the top 5 was tough. But ultimately, I felt like these were the 5 best double play combinations. And when you add in the honorable mentions, I think from that collection of 8 teams, that will be the top 5 at some point, at the end of the season. I think any of those honorable mentions could easily crack this list by year's end.
Yeah, I would say the Guardians. That's the one that I think could have easily been an honorable mention. It's kind of weird when there's a big difference. Like you look at the Astros. Yes, there's a decent gap between Altuve and Pena, but Pena a lot better than Rosario. When there's a gap, when the better middle infielder is the second baseman by a decent margin, I feel like it's kind of harder to push that team across. And Rosario's a good player, but not the caliber player of Pena. And I think Jimenez is closer to Altuve in terms of value from this past season, as a lot of people think, but just below that. So obviously it's just outside there. But I would say that's a really underrated middle infield duo that is going to probably only get better, right? I mean, it was a 6-WAR player from Jimenez last year. Rosario seemed to have a lot of things click for him. That's a really fun middle infield duo. That's one that I would not be surprised to enter the top 5, for maybe next season. or at some point midseason if both of them perform the way we think they can.
So Arm is churning out top 10 prospects by system, and he's doing a really great job. I've been on his ass about the Yankees because all I want to do is talk about Will Warren and Jason Dominguez and Volpe and all these different guys. I'm curious, Arm, because in the minor leagues, from listening to the call up, it seems that the shortstop position in particular, of course, and it normally is, but it seems like this shortstop crop in the minor leagues right now is about as rich as it's been in a very long time. But with that said, there's a lot of shortstops coming up for teams who already have shortstops who might move over to second base. For the teams that weren't mentioned here, for the fans of teams who are looking towards a great middle infield duo in a couple of years, who are some teams with great prospects coming up that you feel have a path, right? A path to play second, a path to play shortstop, who could form a duo? Like, I think to myself, O'Neal Cruz and Nick Gonzalez, or O'Neal Cruz and G1 Bay for the Pirates. The Reds have so many good shortstops. Someone's going to move over to second. Bobby Witt Jr., who's going to be the second baseman for the Royals? Like, all of these teams who aren't mentioned yet, but will be in a couple of years.
That's a great question.
Thank you.
Do not sleep on this Brewers duo of now the established and top 10 shortstop in our game in Adames, and then Bryce Turang, man. I think he's cut from the same cloth as Nico Horner. I think he's going to be a high F4 guy off of the defense and speed and run into 10, 15 home runs. And you're like, whoa, that guy had a 4 F4 last year. That's a middle infield duo that I think could be really, really good. And then, Peter, your Yankees, man, like the combination of Volpe and Peraza, if both of these guys hit their ceilings or even close to it, like that's a really nasty defensive and offensive middle infield. As Peter, for those listening, puts on his Pit Vipers, which are nuts. Those are crazy. Those are crazy. That is a middle infield duo that I think is nice. And I think Peraza is a Pit Viper guy, if I'm not mistaken.
Couldn't agree with you more. Volpe, Peraza, Glaber. It's incredible what we got over here at pitch a little bit of what we were talking about the Yankees. Just humor me. Like just humor about the Yankees farm system for a little bit. Just shower me in praise.
Hey,
please.
Look forward to the call up. We'll be breaking down what I think is one of the better, I think still a top 10 farm system in baseball. The Yankees pitching philosophy continues to just shock me. With how they're able to take a 6th round pick in a good way and just develop that guy immediately. I'm really excited to put this system out. I think it's going to be a really, really fun breakdown that should be out in the next, if you're listening to this, good chance it's either out by the end of the day today or tomorrow.
Check it out. It'll be live on justbaseball.com. The full episode will be available on the Call Up podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the Call Up podcast as well as the YouTube channel if you want to watch Arm's beautiful face talk about prospects. And of course, Jack too. And maybe I'll make an appearance with my Pit Vipers. Ryan is the host of Who's Better Baseball. It's an awesome debate show. We need more of that here for baseball because it's fun to debate different areas in Major League Baseball. Ryan's doing that, bringing on writers. I've been on. Arm's going to be on. Jack's going to be on. The whole gang's going to be on. And of course, one thing that I have to tell you guys, because I'm very excited for it, make sure to download Prize Picks. It is in the episode description. Use code JustBaseball because we are about to unleash season-long props, and they will be only on Prize Picks because we get the best value there. And then you get a deposit match if you use code JustBaseball up to $100. You deposit 50, you get 50. You deposit 100, you get 100. If you're not much of a gambler, but you think it might be fun to throw $10 on a season-long entry and sweat it out and have fun with us as we talk about it all year, you get $10 free anyway. Put that free $10 on, and let's just have a really good time. That link is in the episode description. Of course, not gambling advice. Can't wait for that to begin again. Daily MLB bets, college baseball bets, the whole 9 yards. And of course, you can find all of this on justbaseball.com. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. It's the best way to support this podcast. If you could leave a written review, it's even better. And of course, we have merch in the episode description if you want to support the podcast. And with that, thank you, everybody.